Good evening and welcome to the January 13th Board of Education meeting. Will you please take roll call to determine a quorum?
Sure. Director Connard.
Present.
Cooney.
Present.
DeBeat.
Present.
LaRue.
Present.
Phillips.
Present.
Schneider. Jewell.
Present.
Thank you. A quorum is present.
Thank you. We will stand to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. And welcome to visitors and media representatives. We'll start our agenda with the Student Board Representative update.
Hello and welcome back from winter break. Students at MHS may have some minor schedule changes at the start of second semester, and clubs and sports are starting back up. So with Student Council, the senior survivor contestants have started fundraising for their senior survivor games, where they will compete in different challenges to earn money for their own like community what's the word? Shoot. No, like community organization, or like the thing, they'll donate money to like MCSA or like some like local charity is the word that I was looking for. Okay. They have started planning the Thaw Dance, which is going to be on March 1st. Student Council had their Christmas party on the 18th of December, where members enjoyed snacks and played holiday-themed games. For Key Club, they have their upcoming district convention and leadership conference on February 1st through February 23rd in Springfield. And then the talent show will be on March 13th, and auditions to the show are being hosted on Wednesday, January 29th, before school at 7:30 to 8, and after school at 3:30 to 4:15 p.m. Model UN is getting very busy at this time of year with their Muscatine Model UN conference is coming up. Members have started to write their position papers on their topic. They will debate on topics like on global issues such as climate change, geopolitics, weapons of mass destruction, and other UN committees. Their papers are due on the 19th, and the conference begins on the 29th and into the 30th. UN delegates from all over Iowa, and along with Chinese international students, will be attending the conference. Muscatine Model UN will be going to Washington, D.C. for their International Model UN conference. They will be taking 14 students, and I won't be here next time because I will be in Washington, D.C. with them. Band and orchestra started practicing their pieces for their New York trip, which will be happening during spring break. And then show choir has 4 competitions this month, along with their show Magic, a story of traveling through a magic show. The team has their first official competition on Saturday the 18th in Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Then for sports, the basketball team is currently undefeated. The high school is selling basketball shirts for $15 with limited stock at games, and at their last game, players signed posters. There is also a game on Friday against Assumption. The 35th annual cake auction is the 31st of January during the varsity girl and boy basketball doubleheader with the theme Once Upon a Time. The MHS choir program will sing the national anthem. The MHS band will play during the first half of the boys varsity game, and cakes will be displayed in between plays. Track has started meeting during Muskie time for the team, and future information. Practices will start up early next month. Bowling has had a couple of matches so far this year and has had a great season on the boys and girls sides. On Tuesday, Muscatine will host a dual meet at the Rose Bowl. Last weekend, girls varsity took second at the Clinton Invitational and boys took third. Bowling teams will also have a senior night at the Rose Bowl in Muscatine on January 21st. The boys swim team has also had a meet last Saturday. And that's everything. Thank you.
Are there any questions for them? No? All right. We will move into the citizen speak portion of the agenda, and I believe we have some speaking tonight, maybe. So each individual, as a reminder, has 3 minutes at the podium, and per Iowa code, the board cannot respond. When you approach, please state your name and your address.
I remembered to put the microphone down. My name is Lori Lazinski. I live out in Sweetland Township. And I don't think I'm going to take 3 minutes, but I wanted to express my appreciation to the board and especially the amazing staff that they have here at the Administrative Center. I don't think the general public realizes how much work there is for the school board members who are uncompensated, by the way, but they put in numerous hours, and I just wanted to tell them I appreciate them, and I wish the public would come down here and say the same. I've learned so much by coming to these meetings, and it's enriched me. I know that for sure. I'm a lifelong learner, maybe sometimes not learning the lesson as well as I'd like to, but it's just to say that come down, see what's going on here at the school district headquarters, and then come down and appreciate. I mean, you've got a finance director. This guy, he has the sharpest pen on earth, and I mean, he's right to the penny. I mean, we have all the helpful staff, and I mean, you guys all rock out. And I've been so impressed, and some of the presentations are kind of long, and I'm thinking, can I get my mind around this, my ADHD mind around all these numbers? I don't know how you guys do it, but you do it, and sometimes you might think it's a thankless task, but I do appreciate it, and I know there's tons of other people that do. So I just sat through the community conversation today. I try to make it every month, and today was especially great because we've got a surprise that's coming, and I guess Clint has said that there's going to be more further announcements on an exciting development that we learned about almost 2 years ago. And that's another time when I was there. So it's coming up, and come down here, figure out what to do, get involved with your kids' education. I don't even have any kids in school anymore. Mine are all, that tells me how old I am. I mean, I have grandkids, but I was a product of Muscatine Community Schools. My kids were through Muscatine Community Schools. The quality here is evident and amazing. And I just want to make sure that you knew that there was somebody out there who thanked you for it and who appreciates it. And come on down, the public, and let's get involved in the school district. That's the only thing that can happen is have a positive outcome from it. So that's it, and I made it, well, not 3 minutes, but close.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Joe Myers. I live at 2638 Seven Oaks Park, just on the north side of the bypass. So, on the 3rd of December, there was a note that was approved through Cadet Command for the Army for an approval of JROTC, Army JROTC for Muscatine High School. So that approval is for the fall of 2025. Program is getting initiated, so we'll have a full presentation on whatever questions we can pull from the board and whatever questions we can pull from the community on interested topics. So, yeah. At a later board meeting, we will have a full presentation. The end.
Thank you.
Carrie Dalby, Muscatine, Iowa. I just wanted to come and share with the board specifically how grateful I am, and many others that I've talked to in the community are, especially around the conversation, the time and the consideration that went into the early retirement benefit dialogue. That was something that I could tell, it took some skill and it really took some consideration to identify what was in the best interests of all stakeholders. So I wanted to extend my appreciation for that. So thanks, guys.
Thank We will move into the fiscal year 24 audit review, and we have Mia Frommelt here from Bonsack and Frommelt LLP. Did I say it right? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight. I do have a summary presentation in front of you, and I believe it's also on your screen. We met with the audit committee in November and had a robust discussion, went more in depth into the financial information and the audit results at that time. So tonight is a summary presentation, but I'm happy to take any questions that you have. There are 3 deliverables that are issued as part of the year-end audit. There are 3 deliverables that are issued as part of the year-end audit. There's a large bound book of all the financial information. And there are 2 letters that were issued. One is the board communication letter, and one is what's called the control deficiency letter. In the board communication letter is the larger letter. It summarizes the audits that were performed. It tells you we performed 3 audits. We did a financial statement audit, a government auditing standards audit, which is compliance and internal controls, and then we did a federal single audit over the large federal programs of the district. And the district expended $8.8 million in federal grants in fiscal year 24. Also in that letter is a listing of significant estimates, just for your information, that part of the financials include estimates that are audited, and we concurred with management's results of those estimates. There were no changes between fiscal years of those. They're the same as they've been in the past because there were no real new accounting standards that had an impact for this fiscal year. In terms of the audit results, on the financial statements, we have unmodified opinions on the financial statements. So we are telling you that you have a clean opinion, that the financial statements meet all the generally accepted accounting principles under United States GAAP. So that's a great news. Under government auditing standards, we obtained an understanding of internal controls, and we had no findings. We tested state laws and regulations. We had no findings. In part 4 of the compliance letter are some statutory required reporting. You'll see a few small findings in that are very typical. They're over certified enrollment and supplementary weighting. Most districts have those. It's hard to get all that student information 100%. And then in the federal audit, which is also called the Office of Management and Budget Single Audit, there were 2 major programs that were audited this year. The Title I program was audited, and the Education Stabilization Fund program, which we also refer to as ESSER. Those 2 programs were audited, and there were no findings in either the internal control testing or in the compliance of those programs. So across the board, a great report. Are there any questions?
I think it was 151 pages, right?
Yes.
So,
Tom will go through those later. Coming up on item G.
All right.
thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right. Moving into board targets and goals report. We do have presentations under these items. We'll start with A, students will graduate prepared for post-secondary options. And we have our Iowa School Performance with Joelle McConaughey.
Thank you. So each year I've come to kind of present on the Iowa School Performance Profiles, and tonight I'll just be sharing the latest of those profiles for each of our schools. So as you may know, the Iowa School Performance Profile is an online tool showing how each public school performs on required measures. And so today I'm going to kind of go through some of that reporting with you, specifically in how those measures were weighted. So on this slide, this year, there was a change in the accountability measures from how we've been measured in the past. And so this slide shows how each of those measures are weighted. At the elementary level, they look at proficiency in ELA, math, science, and then also growth in ELA and math and language arts. And then they also included this year chronic absenteeism rates and growth. So you can see how each of those are weighted for elementary. At the secondary level, again, they look at proficiency in ELA, math, and science, as well as growth in those three areas, chronic absenteeism rates and growth, graduation rates for both 4 and 5 years, and post-secondary rates. So based on that weighting, each school is then given a rating category. So these categories show how each school is rated. One thing to know that although the points earned creates a category, there are two other factors that can move a school on that category. So for example, a school may be commendable, but if they are targeted in a subgroup, like special education or EL, then they will move down a category. So even though they may be commendable in points because they were targeted in a subgroup, then they would move down a category on this rating. And you can see that here on the next slide. So our schools here in Muscatine, Franklin was rated as acceptable with no support needed. Grant, acceptable with no support needed. Jefferson and Madison and McKinley all were given a targeted rating based on or a needs improvement or a priority rating, based on being targeted in a subgroup of special education for IEP students. And then Mulberry was rated as commendable with no support needed. So on this slide, you can see their points and then what year or what they were targeted in. So all three of our elementary schools made it in all subgroups except for IEP. At the secondary level, Susan Clark was rated as needs improvement, and the categories for targeted were IEP and EL, and the high school is rated as priority, and their targeted area was IEP as well. So based on these ratings, all of our schools have been going through different processes to help support those goal areas and different professional development needs and work with our AEA to help improve. And I'll talk about that on our last slide. As a district, these are just some of the highlights. As a district, we met the participation rate for testing, and while that may seem like an easy thing to meet, it's not always easy to meet because we have to make sure that a certain percentage of all of our students are tested. Attendance growth was above average for our district, so the state average was 2.18%, and we were at 4.18%. The chronic absenteeism, the state average is 21%, almost 22%. That's one where we want to be below the state average, and we were with a chronic attendance rate of 15%. And if you can remember from a few years ago, we started at 30%, so that's been a really nice area for us as a district. The next page, as you can see, we are below the state average for our graduation 4 and 5 year rates. We are hoping that with our focus of MCAP and working with students that we can increase that rate. We also have many other things at the high school that they are addressing to work on that. Our growth in English language arts, we were very close to the state average. So that was nice to see. And as you remember, we had a new adoption, a couple years ago. So I think that's helped a lot. We are currently in the middle of a math adoption. So we are below the state average in math, but are hoping, with the adoption and some professional development, we can continue to close that gap. And then on the last page, it looks at our percent proficient in science and language arts, as well as some post-secondary readiness areas. We are above the state average with the post-secondary readiness. Although we fell below the state average on work-based learning, there were some SCED coding, some back-end coding with some of our students that are taking some work-based learning courses. And this happened with some other school districts as well. And we are in the middle of changing that and hope that next year we'll be very close to the state average based on those changes. So on the very last page, it kind of talks about the next steps for the schools that had a targeted status. So these are the different steps that we've been working on with those schools. We did have a resource allocation review, which is made up of some teaching staff, administrators, and some of the directors. That's a time where we come together to look at how our resources are allocated to help support the needs of students and staff in those schools. Tonight, we just got done having an Every Student Succeeds Act building data review and SAMI review, where the teams from those schools work together to look at their goal areas and look at where they fell on a rubric. We will then be meeting next week to do action planning, where they're looking at their specific goal areas around meeting needs of students with IEPs and other areas. And then we will also have monthly check-ins in January, March, and May with those administrators to help provide support and resources. So that is kind of an overview of where we are. Did you have any questions? Yes.
What would it mean if like a school is not proficient with their IEPs? Like, what does that mean?
So it just means that students who have an IEP were not proficient. They didn't reach a percentage on their ELA test or math test of where we would want them to be for proficiency.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
On your page that you didn't have, but on the thing that we have here, it talks about based on prior feedback and current MTS structure actions include. And I see where it says literacy and interventionists at Mulberry.
That's the next one. Mrs. Witchers will be covering that one next.
Oh, it's on the next one?
Yes,
I
yep.
apologize.
No, it's
and I got
okay.
ahead
It's
of you.
okay.
Yeah. Okay, then I'll ask it when it comes time.
I do have a, when it says
I'm looking at
post-secondary,
that, it wasn't, you know.
on the reporting your accountability measure weights, post-secondary rate, is that readiness or is that something?
So the post-secondary readiness,
Is
that's
it
students
readiness?
earning
No, I
college
understand what
credit
readiness-
while
it
they're
just
in
says
high school.
grades.
And then the second piece of that is the percentage of students participating in a work-based learning
So it's kind of
experience.
combined for the rate?
Yeah, so we separate them out, but in the past, there were several factors lumped into post-secondary readiness, and they've just kind of highlighted them a little bit differently.
And then
And I do want to mention, this is the first year, so they did change all those, and we talked about them changing the accountability measures. The other difference is normally, we'd be coming to you and we'd be sharing the outcomes of the testing from the previous year and where the ratings are at. And then buildings would have really the rest of the spring to work on building their plans and working through some of the things that Joelle was sharing tonight. When we found out about it not that long ago, they have to have everything completed by February, which is an extremely tight turnaround. Now again, fortunately, a lot of the areas are essentially the same, so it's a lot of the work that's already been done that can continue. But it is a tight turnaround. Now, in fairness to the state, the reason they did that is they want to give every building an opportunity to move off within the same year, right? So at the end of testing this year, you could move off if you were on. It's just a really, again, I think buildings are working through it, but it is a little bit more time constrained than it's been in the past. But having done a lot of the work over the summer and this fall, I think puts us in a much better position to do that. So as we've been talking about MTSS and buildings really being focused on, you know, the environment piece and the instruction piece, all those pieces, MTSS is really at the core of this ESSA work, right? And one of the things they were looking at today is some of those MTSS structures and evaluating. So again, I think from a, you know, where we're at standpoint, they're doing the right work and moving in the right direction. Just this first year of this process, which is why work-based learning is a big standout. We've been doing great work with work-based learning. We have many more students that have had that experience, but it's a scheduling code in the system that gets reported to the state that nobody's ever had to really look at before. And new accountability system comes in, and now suddenly all the districts, many districts are like,
lot of them.
wait a minute, we know we have more kids than that. We'll get that resolved and continue to look at that. The other piece that's attached to this as we look at graduation rates, we are below the state average, but remember, we also found out they'd been miscalculating graduation rates incorrectly for the past 10 years. So they redid everything. They only gave us the last 2 years of data. And so ours showed growth where really the state average has been going down. So there's some positive momentum, and obviously some of the things we've done within CAP and some other things, as Joelle mentioned, I think. So again, just putting some of those pieces back in context for you that we've talked about a little bit in the past.
So for the self-assessment of MTSS implementation, Sammy, how is that, what do you use to assess that?
For the SAMI,
Yeah.
it's like so there's like infrastructure, leadership, there's like all these like different categories, and then within each category, there are like 6 to 10 rubrics that they have to go through for every single one of those. So the work, I mean, it's like a 50-page document, and right now we've just been focusing on infrastructure and leadership, but there are other ones too, like assessment,
So the
instruction.
self-assessment's done by the committee, or?
The assessments that we take through this, like for tier 1, like our CKLA, or at the junior high or high school, it's more around like our tier 1 instruction.
So it's more data, it's kind of a data assessment.
And there are some other data pieces in there too that are state testing, but the rubrics are really looking at individual schools and then as a district, and we just decided to start with infrastructure and leadership because without those two pieces, the other ones can't
Kind of build
function.
a foundation.
So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We do have a comment, I think, maybe not a question. I should have maybe talked it through before tonight, so I'm not going to put you on the spot completely. But so thank you for clarifying where we land in the percentage-wise and how it can move us a category, because when you look at our percentages, most of our buildings are acceptable and nearing commendable, but then have to fall back down because of those target areas. So that's a great explanation. But with the target areas, year after year, I think we're seeing the same schools on here too, which obviously has to do with population and the demographics of those buildings too. So during those reviews, I'm assuming that there's some talk about like what hasn't worked as well.
Oh,
and how we can do-
yes.
Did Franklin improve?
So that's interesting because if you notice Franklin scores, yes, but we don't really have a because like Clint said, this is a new rating, so I don't have something to, it's not like apples to apples that we're being weighted on.
We can let them take the win on the table.
Let them take a win. They came up in a category, and if you look at Jefferson, I mean, they missed it by like 0.03 3 or something, like, yeah, they barely missed it. So I think at the end, I mean, you know, our work really, I mean, this is important to us as, you know, and we're always looking at what's working and what's not working. But I think overall, our biggest goal is like, how do we help all students learn? That's like what we have to be focused on. So while, you know, we know that, you know, IEP is students with IEPs are an area that we are, you know, laser focused on, obviously, we're still working on a lot of measures because until we really meet the needs of every single student, our work is not done, right? So we just have to keep looking.
And we can still break this down, right? Because when I've been on the site before, we can filter it by IEP and
Yes.
see exactly where we missed by building, correct? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, if you go on the website, there's lots of different ways to break it down and to look at the different accountability measures. And each school is doing that with their building leadership teams and our teams that have been coming together each week, so.
I think that is one of the frustrating pieces is that we have our buildings had improvement in a lot of the scores, and yet still some of them, you know, went down in ratings, right? Some of that is the new system, and again, every time you change systems, it's like you're starting over, right? And I will also say our smaller buildings have somewhat of an advantage because the larger you are, the more subgroups you have, right? And the more subgroups you have, the more, I mean, it's just, there are more targets to hit, and it becomes a little more complex. So there is some advantage in being a little bit smaller, but they're all, and again, our work at a district level, as we've talked about, has been around IEPs and some of the work, and having the AEA here last year, and they did that audit of our program, and all of those pieces were kind of built into this, and that's always going to be ongoing work for us.
Joel, thank you, first of all, for sharing this information with us, but I do have just a quick question, just for clarification. Not the last slide, the one before. I'm just for my own knowledge, how they measure that post-secondary readiness index work-based learning. I mean, I can see the college credit one, but how they measure that index? Do we have any idea?
It's how it's put into their schedule and how it's coded in the, like in the master schedule by individual students.
Okay.
So, you know, they may be leaving for a work experience, and that can count for work-based learning. But if it's not coded correctly, kind of on the back end that goes up to the state doesn't register it, so we see it as work-based learning. The state didn't see it as work-based learning. We have to change that code, then it will get seen.
And that's the reason why, because we are below the state average,
Correct.
and I know
And
that
we've
we are
done some
doing
great
a lot
things,
in
right?
that area. in
It's not
particular.
a reflection of the work that's been done, right?
Exactly,
It is the
it does,
reflection
yeah.
of the first time through the process and learning from that.
And I know Mike Zimmer from the state, he's working with a lot of school districts. Like, you know, we just had a meeting with him, I think a week and a half ago, because there's back-end coding that it just gets pulled from, like Clint said. And so once we make those changes, I know our numbers will come way up on that.
And something like that can be easily fixed, just changing the
Yeah.
coding. Yeah.
We'd
okay.
rather have fixed it before this, but, you know, that's okay too. We'll fix
Thank
it for
you.
next time.
Thank you.
All right, thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
We'll move on to the next goal. Muscatine schools will utilize resources effectively and equitably. Their at-risk plan, Becky Witchers.
All right, so I am coming to you again at this time of the year. We are required to bring a proposal for the 2025-26 school year. And so all school districts in the state of Iowa are doing it during the month of January and February. And the reason why is that all school districts are tasked to design a pre-K-12 continuum of services within our system that will meet all the academic, social and emotional behavior needs of our at-risk students in an effort to ensure high school graduation and obviously being a productive citizen post-secondary life. So boards of school districts requesting to use a modified supplement amount for programs for at-risk students This includes secondary students who attend any alternative programs and returning dropouts and dropout prevention, that the board approve the use of these funds for students. And so this also includes an annual request, which is, termed a modified supplemental amount for funding. So it's kind of a mouthful, but we are designated monies, and we need to determine how best we can use these monies to support our students that are deemed at risk. So in Iowa, you have linked this information as well, that the definition in the Iowa Code and the Iowa Administrative Code. And so since programming is always a local decision, definitions and guidance are given to school districts, but school districts are able to decide locally what those specific indicators are that will put students at risk. So our team, which includes directors and also administrators and teacher input, we have determined in our district, these are the potential indicators that when we're thinking of at-risk students, we're thinking of, and it falls under attendance, school engagement, academics, literacy, and numeracy. So our framework, when we're looking at supporting students that may fall within these categories of academics, attendance, emotional safety, we look at graduation rates. Attendance is measured through that ADA, that average daily attendance, as well as our chronic absenteeism. And then graduation rates are measured through the 712 dropout rate, as well as the 4-year graduation rate. We also feel as a district there are other indicators that might indicate that a student may need supports, whatever those supports are. We've kind of unified, agreed that other indicators of at-riskness would be homeless or in foster care. We also look at behavior. ISS, that's in-school suspension. OSS is out-of-school suspension. And then we also have major discipline referrals. And where we're looking at students that have possibly 2 or more, that is also a sign that supports may be needed within that area. We also look at academics. So on our elementary K-6 side, we're looking at students that after benchmark testing would be considered, they're labeled persistently at risk, where those students are typically 2 or more grade levels below benchmark. On the secondary side, we look at on track to graduate. So we would, at the end of freshman year, the student has 5.5 credits. End of sophomore year, we're looking at that 11 credits, and then junior year at the end, 16.5. And then also our low SES, so our social economic students as well. And as you know, our district is around 50% low SES. So what does this all mean? This means we are designated amount of money, and we need to determine how we can disperse this money and support kids. So based on prior feedback and current structure within our MTSS structures, we have included all of these things. So these are programs that and supports that students can access. So we have MHS, a tier 2, so we have some at-risk teachers at tier 2. Our MHS tier 3, which is MCAP, and again, that's another support system for students. We have tier 2 and tier 3 supports at Susan Clark. DW means district-wide. We have a district-wide attendance and truancy liaison. We have a juvenile court liaison. We have a literacy interventionist at Mulberry School. We have a district-wide in-school support for our mindfulness interventionist in the classroom. We also have at the high school in Susan Clark support services through Robert Young. We have EC coaches, environment coaches. Currently, we are proposing that next year we would have, we would use at-risk monies for three FTEs of those ECs. We have a total of 7. And then our district-wide resource navigators, which is that support all buildings. We use these monies to support IJAG, AIM, and summer school. And the summer school is also the Spark program that we have for elementary, but it's also our summer school for Susan Clark and the high school with summer school and credit and component recovery. So when you put all of that together, what does that mean? If your eyes go down to the bottom, you see $1.69 million. So this is the money that is generated that's proposed for 2025-26. So when we look at where is all this money going, you look at FTE. So we look at certified teachers. You can kind of see that the budgeted estimate, and that's 11 FTE. So FTE is full-time equivalent. So that is 11 FTEs, 11 people. Other professional salaries, you can see we have 3. This would be our behavior interventionist at the high school. This, one of these is our district-wide attendance liaison, and the other of the FTE is our juvenile court services. So they kind of fall under that category of other professional salaries. Obviously, you have employee benefits. When we talk about purchased educational services, this is the category where we have 4 resource navigators. Professional development, other purchase services, this is the monies that we have designated for Robert Young, IJAG, and our commitment with AIM. And then we generate a few dollars for supplies, software. That is the cost of the Odyssey software that we are currently using at the secondary level. So when you add all that up, you get a lovely 1.69183. When you add up FTEs, how many people, you get a total of 22. So when you kind of look at our at-risk budget, these are the buckets, the pockets that we entered, that we use our money for in supporting students in and around those targeted areas. The next one, you have, basically it's a program update. So each program or each support, we kind of have a little summary of the position, the location, number of students served. This was a little bit tricky because our people that oversee these programs wanted to give you a specific number, but sometimes these numbers ebb and flow throughout the year. Sometimes we have an increase of numbers after benchmark testing, and then throughout the summer that number changes. And so if you see like the first one, MHS Tier 2 program, number of students served, it has 80 to 100. Well, they're projecting what we currently have and then possibly looking into the future for next year. So some of these numbers might kind of ebb and flow. You look at goals, measurable indicators of growth, the data, and then just kind of a summary. So I'm not going to go into each one of these, but you can see you have a little bit of information on each of these things that we talked about. So tonight, later on in the agenda, there is an action item for the board to approve this. So I'm kind of here giving you information ahead of time, so if you have any questions of myself or with Tom in regards to this funding, we are here to talk about this now. So when we get later into the agenda, you're able to make a decision, a wise decision. So what questions might you have?
Becky, thank you for, again, the presentation also and sharing the information. So the 1.6 or 1,690,000 plus, those are like an extra money in addition to what we are doing in this area. For example, the IJAC, AM, summer schools, but are we talking about those in addition of what we are doing right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the programs that Becky went over haven't changed from this year, so it's nothing in addition to what we're already doing.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
And again, what you're approving is for next year. So you're seeing the programs we're doing this year. That's the cost in doing those programs next year.
My question comes with, sorry, Joelle, I had gotten so involved with trying to read all of the different information you guys had. I have a couple different questions, although that last thing that you said about, pardon me here, the program review thing that really breaks it down very nicely. But at the same time, the part that I was still a little bit confused at is about the literacy at Mulberry. The reason I say that is when Joelle's going over the part about the different schools that are doing compatible, their work is okay compared to priority schools and stuff. It just didn't seem to match up as in why there would be a literacy program at Mulberry instead of at the other schools.
Yeah, okay. Let me see if I can answer your question. So we have 6 elementaries. 5 of them are title schools, so they receive title teachers, which are reading teachers. And so 5 of our schools have additional staff that can support students in reading. Mulberry is not a title teacher.
So it has to be an
but they
additional.
still, so we're unable to pull title monies to put a title teacher there, but Mulberry does have students that do need support within that literacy and math. So we can't use title dollars to put a reading interventionist or a title teacher there. So we use at-risk monies to place a reading teacher there. And they do have their reading endorsement, just like our title teachers. And I don't know, Tom, I can't think of a year that we haven't had the reading interventionist at Mulberry. So it's been in place a lot of years. So this isn't
I
anything
guess I've
new.
never heard it quite, said that way.
We can't call them a title teacher because
Yeah.
they're not a Title I school.
I think that helps I think the general public understand a little better rather than thinking,
Yeah.
how I
Yeah.
presented it. Hey, how come they get the literacy of it? But then the thing that I'm not quite sure is you're talking about, because a lot of this then, and I guess maybe because of later on we'll be talking about the desired experience, but I kept seeing so much information that kept going back to having paras. Everybody wants paras available in which to be able to help in their classrooms. And does any of this address maybe some of those needs?
Currently, all of our FTE would be for certified or classified professionals. We don't have any monies yet designated out of at-risk for para services at this time.
So there's no at-risk paras funded through at-risk?
But we have paras that support at-risk students, but they're not taken out of our at-risk monies.
I didn't know if Karen was done. Is she done? I had another question about the literacy interventionist. That's a full-time position, correct?
Yeah.
And does every elementary have a full-time title teacher?
Yes, we have 13 title teachers, I want to say, in the 5 buildings, so many buildings have more than, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, based on their criteria for Title I.
Do we have all the resource navigators hired now?
Yes, we do.
Environmental coaches, so are those all paid? Is that SEBA?
So it used to be called, yes, it used to be called SEBA. We kind of moved them into EC's environment coaches. So we have instruction and environment. So we have a total of 7. So we are,
I know you said that, but
right, and so right now, this year, we're using some TLC dollars to pay for some of those FTEs, and we're using at-risk. So this year, we used 4. We were able to shift some funding around, and so next year, we're proposing that we pull 3 FTEs out of the at-risk, and 4 will come out of TLC. We still are working through it's just too early to tell if we would be able to generate any more of those ECs out of TLC. We'll be looking at that second semester to see if that is an option too. And sometimes these things kind of change. So, for example, we had a change in Robert Young services. Prior, we were, their services were $100,000. Well, for next year, it's going to be $25,000. So we had a little bit of extra room that we can kind of shift. If that is the case, if we move people around or positions around or reduce like that, then anything extra, we would put that in our summer school for our Spark, because that is a summer program that uses dollars too. So again, this is just a proposed budget for the following year, but sometimes we do have to make kind of some decisions. And
so some of that money could go to paras if you guys so decided?
There would need to be a need for that, and it would need to fall around the parameters of. So we have building paras that support students, so
We also use paras in certain class size situations, right? So there are kind of case-by-case basis where we would add paras in particular buildings.
Is the juvenile court liaison funded totally by the district, or is that a?
So 50% is through at-risk and 50% through a state grant.
That's what I thought.
And then the high school is still in the process of hiring a resource
No,
navigator,
they haven't.
correct?
High school has hired a resource navigator. I think we have one
Gonna need one.
finished in December that we're still hiring at Mulberry. Is that right?
Franklin and Mulberry.
Franklin,
It was shared.
yeah, shared.
it's been allocated.
I see on the resource navigators too, are they funded anywhere else, or do we only have 4 across the whole district?
So we have another resource, a state resource, state decategorization grant that funds, nobody knows here but me, I forget the amount, remember?
There's a,
It's like 70, 50,
Yeah.
40, yeah.
Yeah, and maybe this
small
is
portion.
normal because of referrals, but as of December 31st, we have already, if you look at last year's numbers in 2022 and 2023, I mean, we're 3/4 of the way there in who we've served with those, so if the need is up or we don't.
For our resource navigators,
Yeah, so the number of students served is, as of December 31, was 399 students by those navigators. And last year, for the entire school year, it was 502. Right.
but again, a family could come in that might have 10 people, and if the navigator's working with that family, there's 10. So there's always, yes.
like
And our navigators also support our students, but they also support our families, connecting them. So it could be a point of contact. It could be, we use them a lot to refer students onward and upward, you know, to different services, but yeah.
You mentioned that we'll be billing Robert Young so much less. That's because they can bill Medicaid for those,
Correct.
a lot of those
Yes,
services?
correct,
Is
yes.
that something that changed, that we can do that
yeah,
now?
so when we initially had our agreement with Robert Young, we knew we had ESSER dollars, the federal dollars, that could support that. They were working on kind of shifting to, they needed a community health designation in order to bill. So they could build Medicaid in Illinois, they couldn't do it in Iowa. And so in those years, as our ESSER funds were kind of ending, they were able to get that designation. And so, you know, last year, we didn't realize all of those costs. This year, we budgeted $25,000. Next year, $25,000. That could actually be less. So really, the $25,000 ensures if we had a student that Medicaid didn't cover, their insurance didn't cover, we would cover them in some way, so they got services. So that's really a cushion to make sure that happens. And again, will we use all of that? Don't know. But if, again, it still gives us flexibility to move that around to support other at-risk programs if the dollars are available.
So if you can bill Medicaid, I know that, but if kids are on Hawkeye, is that part of?
They can bill insurance, I believe, and Medicaid. So really the only ones we would be responsible for is if for some reason insurance wouldn't cover it and Medicaid wouldn't cover it.
Every kid in Iowa should have Hawkeye.
Should. And again, but depending on their insurance carrier, there may be situations where they wouldn't cover it. I don't know. So just to be safe, that's what we established with them.
So is the behavior interventionist site school, I assume they don't have ECs, correct? And that's
Yes, they
why-
do not have
What's
a.
the difference between a behavior interventionist and an EC then?
Well, the high school has some people that can kind of serve as their EC. So currently we have a guidance counselor and the behavior interventionist kind of serve as that EC role environment. So they facilitate the environment team. So they have the same teams as our other schools, but we have more personnel at the high school that cover that role. So currently our behavior interventionist is kind of our EC, and then one of our guidance counselors. Between the two of them, they take on that EC role.
So that it's basically the same thing. So it's really not a behavior interventionist, it's an EC.
But they work with students, yes, yes.
So they work with students and ECs don't.
ECs work
As
with
much.
students. So their role is to support students and teachers with behavior supports and with social and emotional and behavior. So they're working with students, but they're also working with the teachers developing a Tier 2 plan or a Tier 3 plan, which involves the student, but it also involves the teacher as well.
So,
And then we have a behavior support team that students can be referred to, and so our ECs are a part of that behavior support team that provides supports for that students and creates a plan for them.
okay,
So what that position does at the high school is a lot of peer mediation. And again, at a school that size with high school students,
well, I just feel,
Being able
obviously,
to-
I'm a proponent of behavior interventionists. I think we need to go lower with some of that peer, but that's a whole nother topic. But I just wondered if it was the same, basically the same, covering the same needs.
I have one other one in, and maybe I'm trying to read this a little wrong, but mindful-based interventionists. Can you explain that out a little better? Because I see where it says that we had individual referrals of 99, an offering of 1 for something with self-care. What is the intent of that?
Right, so this intent, this part of this position comes out of at-risk. The other part that makes up the full salary comes out of special education. So this person is working with our students that have current behavior goals. So again, part of this role is special ed, part of it is gen ed. So the mindfulness-based intervention is working with students. They get referred. First priorities are special education students, so they're teaching social skills, self-advocacy goals, mindfulness, because it's as it relates to their IEP behavior goals. And then the other portion, they're working through the SST. This person gets their referrals. So that comes from the building through the referred system of our MTSS process. We have a weekly SST meeting, so referrals come through that might need support within that behavior or social emotional realm. So it's just another person that can support the student if need be.
And then I see where it says staff self-care and professional development offerings 1.
So we have buildings that request this person to provide professional development for themselves in the classroom, giving them classroom strategies, de-escalation, mindful-based strategies. And so oftentimes this person gets referred to come in and work with the teacher or the whole class, which it has been pretty impactful. So
The reason I brought that one up, I apologize, but that is also on that daily desired experience thing, and where different ones felt that they perhaps needed a little bit more training in which to be able to know how to be able to do some of those.
Yep. Priority of this position is to work with our students that currently have behavior goals and within their IEP, and then students that are referred through the SST, they're a Tier 2 or a Tier 3 intervention, and then class-wide lessons, so to speak. So that's the kind of the priority of this person.
All right, any other questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
The last goal is that students will learn in a positive and supportive environment. We do not have any presentations or reporting under that, so we'll move into the superintendent update.
Thank you. Just some quick updates for you today, and I think probably the biggest one is anticipating the governor's State of the State address tomorrow. Important for a couple of reasons. One, it's really going to outline what the focus of the legislative session will be. Some initial things that we're hearing, and again, we won't know until that happens tomorrow what really is the priorities there, but What we're hearing is there's probably going to be some talk around, I wouldn't be surprised to hear more conversation around preschool and fully funding preschool. Right now, it's a 0.5 weighting for preschool and moving that to 1.0. We're probably going to hear some stuff around cell phones and the policy around cell phones. What I would expect if that does get passed, it's likely to be a law that requires you to have a policy. It won't tell you what the policy should say. That would be my guess where that ends up. And then the other piece that's critically important is some conversations around, we really get an idea where the governor is on school funding. And as we look at SSA, and really that starts the clock ticking on what they're supposed to have is 30 days to establish SSA from the governor's address. That doesn't always happen. But again, the reason that is important is, usually we have, that the House will be up here, the Senate will be way down low, and the governor somewhere in the middle, and then they work to find a resolution. And obviously, SSA is our primary driver of school funding, and as we're getting into these budget conversations. And the other piece of that is, as we went through last year, when we send out those notifications to all the taxpayers in the community, and what that impact will be, as you recall, last year, we didn't know what SSA was going to be. So we had to set it at the lowest possible level, which is 0, right? Which is going to have the highest impact on taxes. And so then, even though we know it's going to not be 0, we assume that, we set it that way. Even if everything happens on the timeline as it's supposed to, the timeline is so tight, we still may not be able to have it where we want it to be exact in those notifications. So I just want to make sure we keep that on your radar as we're really, getting into the budget season here, and that really sets it off. Keep in mind that with declining enrollment, we're likely to be on budget guarantee. Unless they set SSA at, 4 something, it was really high. The chances of that happening aren't good, but every piece, I think we've budgeted for 2%, is that right? We're estimating that right now. So for every little piece above 2%, that budget guarantee amount goes down, which is good. So, the more movement we can get on that, the better, but really that really kicks that piece off. Any questions about that? So we'll be listening intently, and then we'll be updating you every time we meet a little bit legislatively on what's being talked about, what we're hearing, and where things might end up. The last piece, I just want to take a moment. Well, I also want to say that, we did have Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Myers here talking a little bit about the JROTC program. As you know, he was here 2 years ago when we started talking about this. The wheels at the federal level move very slowly. But some of that was anticipated, and so as we were thinking about when we might see a program start, we kind of were looking into next fall anyway. So a lot of things are now happening in terms of really better defining what that's going to look like, and we will bring that to you and update you on that. I know he sat in on community conversations and provided some great insight there. He's shadowing the Davenport program, which has been in place for a long time, getting some good information there. So we're excited to get that program kicked off. Again, from a high school standpoint, the biggest piece is getting it under the course catalog so students can pick that option, right? So doing a lot of that work to make sure kids can get signed up for it. What we heard tonight was when it was announced, we know of about 15 juniors that already said, as a senior, I want to be in that. And typically we have a little over 20 students every year graduate and immediately enlist. So we know as you look, because they can start as a freshman, right? You look over the course of freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors, we have enough students that are interested in that to support that program. So again, we'll be looking to get that off the ground, and we'll be back to you with more information. And then the last piece, I just want to quickly introduce Matt Koss here in the back. You can just wave. Very shortly here, a recommendation to hire him as our new Director of Communication and Community Engagement. Matt brings a ton of experience in journalism, working with the Muscatine Journal and the Quad City Times for a number of years. So we're excited to have that experience. He's also from Muscatine, and his wife teaches special ed at Madison. His mom was a teacher at Madison, so a lot of strong ties to this community, and we're just excited to have him on board, pending your approval tonight. So with that, any questions for me?
All right, we can move into the action item of our agenda, or portion of our agenda. We'll start with A. The following items are considered to be routine by the Board of Education and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a director so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence from the agenda. Minutes, bills and claims, employment recommendations, special education contracts, and the interfund transfer of the general fund and the PEPAL fund. How would the board like to proceed?
Denny usually does that, doesn't he?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Thank you, Denny.
Second.
A motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All right, all in favor of the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. All right, that moves us past F. We'll go to item G, to approve and place on file the fiscal year 24 financial audit, which we did get a summary on today. So how would the board like to proceed?
Motion to approve and place on file the fiscal year 24 financial audit.
Second.
Were there any other questions? or
Karen
comments?
can have it.
Karen?
Yeah.
All right, any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Right.
Any opposed, same sign. Okay. All right. Item H, approve administration authority to seek SBRC modified supplemental amount for 2025 to 26, returning dropouts and dropout prevention at-risk program, and the amount of $1,114,616. How would the board like to proceed?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. And I approve the change order for the Muscatine Community School District Central Project in the amount of $56,433 to Rock River Electric for the replacement of the existing fire alarm system. How would the board like to proceed?
Second.
All right, and discussion?
This is at Central School. Does that mean then for the auditorium and the, what is needed for the gym area?
Yes, it's replacing half of the devices. There's some existing ones that we're going to use as well.
And that also ties it into Jefferson.
No, it'll be a separate, they're two separate systems, yeah.
Systems in the gym and the auditorium?
There is not, but that, we met with Russell last week to go over some of the auditorium project, and part of that project will be to sprinkler those areas.
All right, we do have a motion and a second, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, the same sign. All right, that portion went really fast. All right, discussion and information, we have our December financials.
Okay, so tonight there's the December financials being presented, the treasurer's report, and then our bank reconciles compared to last month. Just wanted to point out then, February 24th will be our budget work session, and then I bolded there those timelines Clint was referring to. By March 5th, I'll be submitting our preliminary, I guess, figures or budget to the auditor. The county auditor will mail out those statements by March 15th. Hopefully, I would think by February 24th, when we have our work session, we'll have some good idea about at least our property tax rate. And then on the 20th, not before the 20th, we'll have to have a special meeting for that public hearing number 1. And then we'll just set our public hearing number 2 meeting for our regular board meeting on April 14th. I think that'll work, and then the budget's due April 30th. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, so. Okay? Thank you.
All right.
Tom, while you're up here, just another thank you for all the work on the audit and his team. Just as you look at that wall, there's a couple of plaques there, and that, you know, besides the clean audits and the audit committee, you know, there's those other organizations that are looking at our audit and also giving us their recommendations. So I know a lot of work goes into that. Just want to say thank you.
Better to have a sharp pencil than a dull eraser.
Or a pen. I have a pen right now.
And thank you, Tom, because you always make it so that I can understand what's going on.
You're welcome.
Along with Clint's help then, too.
All right. Are you the presenter for we have the 2024 Daily Desired Experience results, so. we'll go
Unfortunately, this year, you're stuck with me on the DDE, so we're gonna walk through this. I'm gonna move pretty quickly because it's not necessarily new information. We've done this for a number of years. This is our daily desired experiences. We've created this survey to get feedback from students, families, and staff. We send it out in October through early November every year. We send it out in English, Spanish, and French in order to, again, get as much feedback as we possibly can and try to make it as easy as possible for people to respond. As we look at our response this year, we had a record number of responses. Our student responses were up to 1,589. Remember, last year, we went through that process where we didn't have people at registration because of the change in the survey law. So that number went down significantly. So we've got that number back up. Our families number is up higher than it was. And our staff number is just a little bit higher, but still, it's still higher, right? So we're getting we continue to see a strong response, which is very positive. Now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time going through these, but we walk through from a student standpoint, from a staff standpoint, and a family standpoint. And in the PowerPoint, you can kind of see where those responses were the previous year and where they are this year. And what you're going to see in general is that it continues to get more positive. As we look at, kind of overall, and this is where it starts to tie into our vision card when we report that out on our vision card. As we look at students, overall students actually went down slightly. We went from 76% of students being highly satisfied to highly satisfied to 73%. But again, we have twice as many responses. So as we kind of get more consistent on responses, I think we'll see that continue to grow. And it's still significantly higher than it was the first year we took the survey. Our families, a year ago, we would use 72%. This year at 78%, so continued growth from our families. And again, the number of responses went up. And for our staff is up as well, from 68 to 71. And again, just a few more responses again. So as you kind of look through each one of these, you'll see some, again, some are up and down, but overall, that response rate continues to be more positive. The one piece I want to spend a little time on explaining when I talk about that translation from these results to our vision card. Over the past 4 years, right, we've had a metric, and as you recall from our vision card, that number was always really low, right? It was more like in the 50s. So we've had some conversation about, wanting to make sure we're really looking at that in the correct way. And working with David Svensson, who does all of the data analysis on the back end. When that was initially set up, essentially, you have for every question, you have 5 options for a response, right? You have agree, strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree, and then you have neutral, okay? So neutral is 3, then you have agree is 4, strongly agree is 5, and so on. So when you start to calculate these overall as it translates to the vision card, the way it had been done in the past, unless the average, so every individual, their average score had to be a 4 or higher to be included in that satisfied to highly satisfied. Okay, does that make sense? So if you look at all of one person's answers all the way down and average that score together, right, it had to be at 4 or higher, which means everything was satisfied to highly satisfied. So we had some conversation really as numerically, if you think about it, if somebody answers, if their average is 3, that's neutral. They're not satisfied, but they're not dissatisfied. So it's really taking a look at what number between 3 and 4 as an average puts you into that category. So we changed it to 3.5. So it's in between, it's not below, so they're not in that neutral, they're above that, so they've answered a number of questions more positively than negatively. But then what we did is went back and did the exact same calculation to all of the results previously. So when you look at the vision card, you're not going to see a difference. It's the exact same. So we've been consistent with all of the previous years because we have all of that data. So we just reran it for everything. And so as I'm reporting to you, whether we did the 3 or the 3.5, we still would have seen an increase. But some of what's happening is as people are becoming more positive, so between 3 and 4, you can be moving there, but we wouldn't know that because we set the average at 4 or higher. Does that make sense? Okay, I see some head nodding, I see some furrowed brows. But again, we wanted to make sure we were being consistent on that, so we changed that for all of them, okay? So every year when you get the vision card, you're gonna see, and we're still not necessarily in the categories where we wanna be, right? But I feel much better about how we're calculating it than we did before, okay? All right, so now going back to these, again, you can see as you look through that, these are our family responses, and these are our staff responses. And you can compare year to year, and we show the number of responses. So really now is what sets off the next process. We have the results. We're sharing with you. You received all of the comments. Every staff member, every family, and every student who made a comment, you received those. We will attach all of those comments to this presentation when we're finished. So all of that, anybody can see that. We've done that in the past. We've taken out names. So if somebody specifically is mentioned, we remove their name. But otherwise, the statements are the statements, okay? And part of that is because we want to be transparent. That these, when we ask, what can we do to improve? We want to know what you have to say, and we want to look at those. We don't want to hide any of that. So then as we begin to, what do we do with this information? And last year we had a district environment committee, and then we had every building had an environment committee that was working on this. So we'll meet with the district environment committee again here on the 23rd. We'll talk about these results. We'll kind of review where we're at and the work that has been done. And then every building on the 30th will be looking at their individual information. So all of the comments will go to them for their, specific to their building, either from their staff or from parents. And again, this year we allowed parents to check multiple schools. So, you know, again, if it's the high school in, let's say, Madison, they're both going to get that comment, okay? Now, it may be directed at a specific building, but if we can't tell, we're giving it to both. If in that comment it said, at the high school, we're going to move it just to the high school, okay? And again, that, in the past, what we did is just gave all of the comments from all parents to every single building. So this helps us fine-tune that a little bit. So the buildings will have all this information. They'll have what they've been working on. Then they'll use this new information, this new feedback to start building more improvement plans, right? Then they're going to come back. We have an individual from all of our buildings that's a part of that district environment committee. They're going to bring that. Here's what we're focused on. They're also, as they did last year, kind of identified, here's what we see as building work and here's what we see as district work, right? We'll take that feedback. We'll start developing and adjusting our improvement plans, and we'll keep working and moving forward. Last year, you know, the main categories, communication, professional development, and behavior. As you look at our staff comments, and I'll speak more specifically to them, you still see some of those comments around communication, around accountability and follow through. And again, some of that is school specific, some of that is district, and we'll kind of work through that. You still hear about behavior, which, as you know, was continued to be a focus for us. There was talk about mental health, there was talk about salary and negotiations and kind of how those pieces have kind of transpired over the last couple of years. And again, so we'll continue to take a look at those comments, work on our plans, and move forward. As you look, you know, again, you have access to all those comments. You know, I would say my overview of the family comments were more school specific, I would say, than district specific. And student comments, there's a lot about recess. There's, you know, but there's also a lot about, you know, hey, I really need you to treat me this way or do this, right? And I think that's really still good feedback for the buildings to continue to look at and work through. So with that, I'm going to pause. Again, I know it's a lot of information. This is just the introduction to this year, right? So you can see the overview and where we landed. And then we'll be back as we have sharing, you know, as the buildings meet, as the district committee meets, we'll continue to share where we're at with the work for those committees.
So does this mean, like, after we have a chance to do that for the next year, that we look at how we do some of the questions, you know, because we've kind of tried to improve on that each year, because I know that there was more than several that sometimes there was.
Every year, we get comments about how the survey is put together.
Yeah.
Here's the problem. And this is something I share with the District Environment Committee too. In order to do that, you're going to triple the length or double the length of that survey. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, fewer people will take it. It's too long, I'm not doing it, right? And so we have the open comments. People who have something to say specifically that's different at a building versus the district can say it, and they do.
Right.
As you read through there's a number. And there's people who have answered it and said, this is how I would respond as a building, this is how I would respond as a district, and they can do that. So there's nothing preventing them, if they feel like the question doesn't exactly align to what they want. The problem is we're going to get into making it much longer, and it's going to impact how people are responding.
Sure. It was actually, I think, more, I understand what you're saying there, but it was more on the line of, like, two different questions were asked within the same question in itself or something.
And that, again, that feedback is there every year, because as you look at how the DDE statements are structured, we built the questions specifically off the statement. So you could start taking those statements and separating every single piece of it out, but then again, the length of your survey gets longer and longer, right? And the longer it gets, the less likely they're gonna get to the end, right? So
Understood.
it's
I
that
just-
balance. We also hear every single year, I'm not sharing anything because you make it, everyone can see it, and I don't want everyone to see it. But if we didn't do that, then they'd say, you're hiding it, right? And we're not. You put it in there, again, as long as it's not profanity laced, we're gonna leave it in there, right?
Well, Clint, if, Karen, are you
No,
done?
I was just going to say that very clarifies that better, because I think a lot of times the general public don't understand why you did it within that structure. That's what I was trying to get at, so thank you.
For me, I'm glad to see almost the number of students doubled that took the survey. Family also, we have really, somehow, we have some increase. But staff, it's 3 more people than last year. What can we do to entice more staff to participate?
I think, you know, what we've tried to do is we continue to encourage them. We provide opportunities like we do, you know, we try to give them time in their professional development time to take the survey, right? We don't force them to do it. And that's, you know, again, at the end of the day, but, you know, I think we continue to encourage and make it as easy as possible, provide the time for them to do it, but ultimately they have to make a decision to do that. But at getting at 500, we're getting to the vast majority of our staff. So we are getting,
Is that just certified staff?
that's all staff.
And we provide time to non-certified as well?
Correct.
Saw a couple themes again. Actually, I would have said behavior comments were fewer than what I've seen in the last
I think it was
year,
still,
so
I think it's
it
fewer, but they're still
shows-
there.
They're still there, yeah, but I do think that it shows progress, the areas that continue to rise. And I will say, Karen and I talked about this a minute ago, that when we read some of the comments, I mean, there were 34 pages, I don't know, is it like -2 font size? It was-
Sorry.
I had to zoom. And so it was a lot of comments, which we appreciate. So if anybody's curious if we read them, like, yes. But I think it was a little overwhelming this year. I feel like we read last year and the year before, and it felt like people wanted change. And I'll say, like, I didn't really necessarily feel that way this year, which was kind of disheartening because I don't know how to help or what conversations we start with. So if you guys are all exhausted too, I think I understand. Some of the themes, communication, staff value, and I'm talking about staff comments as well. I love the kid comments, but communication, being valued and appreciated, and with some of that went into that compensation and really just feeling like they were bargained for appropriately. And then culture and relationships. So within the comments, there were some returning comments too, and I'll just call it the Early Learning Center, that I think sometimes we can look at that communication, value and appreciate their time, and then bring them in and form relationships. So I know on the 30th, everybody has meetings to be in, but when buildings are looking at this data, if they have somebody, I maybe said this last year too, so I'm sorry, but if we had somebody from facilities or a report from the city saying, here are our barriers, if anybody can help us get creative, here's how much concrete costs. Like, I understand that it comes from a safety concern, but conversations have been had, and maybe hearing it from the people that are having the conversations would bring some of that value. Because I read the theme too, that they feel very advocated for within their building and by their administrator, but they don't know where the conversation goes next or who's coming back and giving them the time or the conversation. So I think 10 minutes could go a long way. And I've heard what you guys have to say about it, and I think it could change conversations. So Chris looks confused. I'm sorry. And then I did want to talk about some of the kids' comments, just because obviously everybody wants more recess. But I did see some discrepancies, and then it was shown in the actual like questions, where I don't feel that my student gets the same activities or access to things across the building. So or across different buildings in the district. So there were some comments about how they would like to have recess as 6th graders. So maybe we are, maybe we're not, but at that time there was not consistency, or at least they were reporting that some 6th grades are not getting that recess. So what does that look like across buildings? And then, of course, like after-school clubs, things like that. And so just reporting more on that and communicating the whys, I think is really helpful. So I'm gonna have to read them all again, though, because I'm still, I gotta go through the staff comments again, because it's a lot.
I just want to, just add to it from the standpoint that this is almost an overwhelming job for you guys to do, because I know when I was going through the statements and stuff, it was almost exhausting to me. And I found myself going, okay, now how were you going to pick out this and make, and bring it to, like what you just described with how to bring it to the buildings and everything else. And so I want to, ahead of time, say thank you for your continual work on all of this, and that we can just continue to move forward to make sure that we are doing the best we can on our communication and such for them.
So a couple of things following up on that. I don't know that there's ever going to be a year that I read these comments and it's like, we're there, right? Things happen every year, things change, and there's always going to be pieces. And every year that when you talk about being exhausted reading through them, and I'm sure it's no different from any of our directors and our principals, it takes me a while to read through them. I read through them and it starts to like, ugh, and I shut the lid. And then when I'm feeling better, I come back to it, and I come back to it, and about the third time I've read it, I feel different. Like, then it's like, okay, the hard part, and this is the value of that district committee, is we can talk about communication, but finding something that really fit, because what you want for communication, what you want for communication, what you want for communication, what you want, it's all different, right? And so it's very difficult to create solutions that work for everyone, because for some people, that's too much. For some people, it's not enough. But it's that process to go through that, have the conversation, and again, I think we'll see, the buildings they're gonna probably hear some different results this year than last year, and it's a continuous improvement process. This isn't easy, it isn't fun. It'd be a lot easier to not do this and just move on. But if we really wanna get better, we have to continue to do it and prioritize it and have those tough conversations and then say, okay, in the end, what do we do? Okay? And we can look back at some of the work we've done last year around professional development, around behavior, around communication. We've made some improvements. Okay? Now let's take this new information, let's see what the building's working on, and how do we keep moving it forward? And we keep going and we keep going. The one thing we can say is we've consistently done this from that first year to this year and moving forward. And we're gonna do it again, right? We'll be back in October to put it out there. We'll try to get as many people responding as possible, and we'll keep moving. And I really appreciated the comments this year that said, hey, I saw some improvement. Here are the things I still feel like haven't been addressed. Great, appreciate that, and those are great. So again, we're always gonna have work to do, and it's tough work, but I think it's the right work.
Is there any way to get the results and start those meetings sooner?
It really is difficult because it's a lot of data to process and pull together, and then you run into November and December, right? We've tried to stay away from end of the year because there's a lot of things happening at the end of the year. Remember that first year we did spring, and it's just like in amongst all kinds of other surveys and activities, just wasn't getting done. So we targeted October because you don't want to do it right away. You want to give a little time for school to get going, right? And then it does just take that time to really go through there, and we've got to go through, and then we've got to go through, and somebody's got to look at every single comment and say, well, that's a name, I got to take that out, right? All those pieces. It just takes time and a time where there's a lot of breaks.
School year is just not long enough.
Yep. But again, some of it should, as we get better at it, it should be a continuation, right? So we can say, here's what we've been doing, here's the new information we got. Maybe some of the activities and action plans stay the same, because it's still the same thing we're focused on, and maybe they need to change.
Nothing else? All right. Now I've scrolled through everything, so I have to find my spot again. All right, the 2025 to 2026 school calendar discussion.
So I'll talk through that a little bit. So this is a very similar process to what we've done last year. Attached to the agenda tonight are 3 different calendar options. This week, we'll send out, so after tonight, we'll send out a survey to our staff and to our parents and get feedback on those options. We'll share some of those results and some of that feedback at our work session. And then based on those comments and kind of what we see from that, when we come to our meeting in February, we'll have a recommended calendar and an action item for you. So we wanted to at least get the process started so you can see we have some different calendars. We've already gotten some feedback from the association on that, but we'll get it out to everyone like we've done in the past and get feedback on that. So questions about the process or any comments you want to
Will
make?
they be posted on social media? The
I
3
think we-
choices? I just think that's a good idea because
We did last year.
unfortunately.
Yeah, I think
that's
we
where
did it
everybody
last year. I don't
looks.
think we,
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm just.
the staff, we can
thought.
email the whole staff and get that
Oh,
link.
I'm just thinking more
And for
parents.
families, we can Parent Square and social media in different ways, yeah.
I do think it went out on social media last year, and there was a lot of
sure.
discussion actually about it.
I would like to have some serious discussion about the change from winter break back to Christmas break.
Okay.
Meaning I'd like to see it say Christmas break. I didn't buy any of my kids or grandkids a winter present. It was all Christmas presents.
And can you know my family would align right there with you, but I do recognize too that there are several people that don't do any Christmas gifts. And in some Christian faiths, gifts aren't even given until after, break resumes.
Then
So
Christmas
I
and
don't know
religious
how you-
holidays
Could be.
cover everything.
I like the covering of it all.
Is your draft day, is that what we've used this year? Or is any of these from what we're currently using?
They're all kind of variations of, and some of that, everything changes each year because where things fall moves a little bit. So then we just adjust a little bit and then just try to give you some similar scenarios depending on how we do things.
We can do some work outside of the table too, I think, and decide if there needs to be an action item on a future agenda. Is that fair? Can we do
Yeah,
that?
so you're going to have an opportunity to talk about it next month.
Okay.
And then, we're going to get feedback and then you'll have an item to approve in February.
So ahead of that, we can do some research and see.
Yep.
All right. Okay, any other discussion on the calendars? All right, we'll move into administrative regulation policies. We have 708.1, regulation 1, 708.1. What does E1 stand for?
Which is what?
E, what's the E?
Exhibit, it means
Oh,
like a
exhibit
form or
one.
a,
Okay, a
something
form,
like
sorry,
that.
thank you. And 708.1, exhibit 2. Any discussion around those? All right, we'll move into announcements, meetings and events. January 20th, we have an in-service, no school. January 27th, board work session meeting. January 30th, 2-hour early dismissal. January 31st, we have in-service, no school. February 4th, Riverbend and Muscatine Community School District mobile food pantry returns. February 10th, community conversations, and then the regular board meeting to follow. Are there any other announcements? Take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any